So we'll move now to the snapshot of cogeneration around the world. The next speaker will be Alexandra Tudoroiu, who is the head of policy at COGEN Europe, and she's also responsible for COGEN Europe's National Snapshot Survey. So the floor is yours, Alexandra.
Thank you, Hans. Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. Indeed, I will echo many of the messages that we've just heard from Simon and zoom into what's happening in Europe today and in the future with the cogeneration markets. But first, a few words about COGEN Europe. We are the Association for the Promotion of Cogeneration in Europe. Our vision is coherent and aligned with CWC's vision. We work with our members and with EU institutions towards a resilient, decarbonized, decentralized and carbon neutral European energy system by 2050. And we are a members-based organization with a hybrid type of membership, bringing together national associations from across Europe, as well as corporate members that span across the entire energy value chain, from manufacturers to utilities and to industrial users and DHC users of CHP. With that said, I will also show some of the Eurostat, that's the European Statistical Office of the European Union, that collects quite detailed data on CHP. So I will share in my introduction some of those statistics. This is an overview of CHP generation across the past 10 years. You can see that CHP has been stable. It has had a quite stable share of within the EU energy mix as well. This is country by country in 2019, and to confirm Simon's overview, indeed, Germany is the largest market for CHP, being the largest energy market in Europe. But then we have countries with quite high shares of CHP in their energy mix. As you can see, Finland, Latvia, Denmark, these are traditionally countries that have used and are still using quite a lot of CHP in their district heating networks. Lithuania, Estonia, similarly, have quite high shares of CHP in total electricity production, exceeding 20% and exceeding the EU average. And this is how the CHP fuel mix has developed over the past 10 years. We can see a clear trend in coal and fuel oil going down in share, and we expect it to continue declining. And that share has been replaced by renewable-based CHP that has grown from around 9% in 2009 until around 30% today. So that those are the more prominent trends. When it comes to natural gas, that accounts for about 40% of the CHP fuel mix, and it has been stable over the past 10 years. Yeah, in terms of contributions to EU climate, very ambitious climate and energy objectives, we see that CHP contributes towards 12% of total electricity supply in Europe and 16% of the heat. It's quite an important technology of choice for industry. About 60 gigawatts of CHP are installed on site in key industries like the chemical sector, pulp and paper, and then half of CHP we estimate that is installed in district heating, and it covers quite a significant share of district heating. That's 70% of district heating schemes that use CHP heat. And an emerging CHP solution, that's micro CHP, where we see some growth in several countries. And we expect that around 100,000 micro CHPs are installed in buildings, generally larger buildings, but we also see single family homes that are benefiting from micro CHP today. Then in terms of energy efficiency, also according to Eurostat, between 85 and 95% of CHP qualifies as high efficiency CHP. That is to say that the CHP reduces primary energy consumption by at least 10% compared to best-in-class alternative technologies. This translates in quite significant primary energy savings. That's around 1,300 petajoules, which is equivalent to, because now we're counting everything in BCM, that's 30 to 40 BCM equivalent of gas, and also more than 15 BCM of direct gas savings that are associated with the CHP that runs on natural gas. So just to put things into perspective, that's around equivalent to around 10% of the Russian gas imports last year, which are one of the objectives of the EU to grow less dependent of. Then in terms of renewable energy, as I mentioned already, CHP relies about 30% on renewable energy sources. That's mainly biomass, but we see a growing trend towards renewable gases and hydrogen, as also Simon mentioned. And of course, coal and fuel oil, CHPs are rapidly declining. And what we also see happening more and more is a focus on energy resiliency. CHP is one of the cleanest sources of dispatchable electricity today in Europe. So we expect that increasingly flexible CHP will have higher and higher value for the EU energy system as it decarbonizes and it relies more and more on intermittent renewables, as well as demand increasingly electrifies. So now turning to the actual snapshot of CHP in Europe, this is a survey that we carry out every year, asking national experts to share their views on the CHP industry sentiment. This year we managed to survey 15 countries that represent 82% of installed capacity in EU 27 and Turkey. And you can see here in dark blue the countries that were included in the survey. So what we learned in terms of short-term trends is that CHP has been stable over the past few years. The lack of growth, I would say, has been impacted, of course, by COVID-19 downturn, as well as more recently the energy price crisis that we're experiencing quite acutely in Europe. This is the overview in terms of installed capacity and electricity production from CHP systems from the countries surveyed. We nevertheless see some countries where there's still some growth. And of course, this relates back to 2020 to 2021, so not necessarily this year. But yeah, growing countries where growth is still happening in CHP include Germany, Poland, Turkey, and we also see growth segments including natural gas and renewable-based CHP. In terms of the 5-year outlook, this is one of the questions that we ask every year. And we see that CHP experts across the EU, or across Europe, I should say, generally expect growth, except for some countries where, of course, there's an uncertain outlook for CHP, such as Spain, France, Belgium, Austria, and Greece, I see here. But in general, there is expectation that CHP will grow. And this is a more in-depth overview of those segments where we expect growth. So as I already mentioned, as we would all expect, the whole energy system is going towards higher shares of renewables. There's quite ambitious renewable targets, and that will be reflected in where CHP is going. Indeed, at the moment, there's quite a stable, I would say biomass is the highest share of CHP, but we expect growth in renewables to be taken up by greening the gas grids, and therefore having CHP rely increasingly on renewable gases and hydrogen. Then we also expect in some countries growth on natural gas. Those are those countries that have relied on coal and that now see natural gas as a way to decarbonize their generation mix. And of course, that is put on hold for the time being because of the energy crisis. However, we do hear from, let's say, the Czech Republic, Turkey, Poland, that they're very committed to switching from coal-based generation to efficient gas-based CHP. And then the next step would certainly be a switch to renewable gases and hydrogen. District heating is also a growth segment for CHP, as well as industrial and commercial based CHPs. The future is slightly uncertain for domestic micro CHP systems, and that could be linked at the moment with the push for electrification of domestic demand and electrification of heating that has taken up quite a lot of steam over the past few years. However, there are technologies which are becoming closer, they're becoming more competitive. So we'll see where that lies in a few years' time. This is an overview of CHP support schemes at the time the survey was carried out. So the first half of this year, you can see that there's a mix of different support schemes that relate to different CHP segments, from feed-in tariffs to tenders, to tax incentives, even capacity mechanisms have been employed to support CHP. But the feedback that we receive increasingly is that these support schemes are not sufficient to make CHP competitive. So especially in the current energy price crisis, those support schemes have not been aligned with the quite dynamic and volatile evolution of energy prices. Spark spreads have stayed quite high or reasonably high for CHP. But what we've also seen is that there's been emergency intervention in electricity and gas markets, which have distorted markets somewhat, leading to quite a lot of uncertainty for CHP. And of course, we have the overarching EU energy and climate policy landscape that is currently being discussed at European level. There's the Fit for 55 package, which aims at increasing ambition on energy efficiency and renewable energy with the aim of delivering higher greenhouse gas emission reductions by 2030 on the path to 2050. There's also green financing legislation, which does include CHP as a technology that contributes towards climate mitigation and climate adaptation under different conditions. And then, as mentioned, we have the energy price crisis that has been there in 2021, but it has been aggravated quite seriously by the war in Ukraine. And for that, the EU has tried to come out with coordinated emergency measures to tackle it. So we have in parallel efforts to reduce dependency on Russian gas imports, also efforts to increase diversity of gas supply from other sources, as well as targets to reduce demand, both on gas and electricity. So what are the key takeaways of our snapshot surveys? There's definitely drivers for CHP growth in Europe. There's the increasing role of resiliency, or increasing importance of resiliency and flexibility of the energy system as renewable electricity becomes, or as intermittent renewable energies become more prominent, and there we need clean backup solution to balance the energy system. And also there's increased visibility to energy efficiency, which makes CHP the perfect candidate to contribute towards reducing energy consumption. But of course, there are also challenges. So CHP is a gas reducing solution and an efficiency solution, but at the same time, most of CHP today in Europe is a gas user, and the current market conditions make it challenging to look into the future and invest in CHP. So at the moment, there is a wait and see vibe going on when it comes to new investments in CHP. There's also of course, the focus on decarbonization, and there, the switch from coal to cleaner fuels will be important, and there's also increasingly a focus on what will be the long-term role of gas and the transitional role of natural gas. So there we have to also get more certainty about the volumes of renewable gases and hydrogen that will be available for CHP operators. And then finally, the role of CHP in Europe long-term. COGEN Europe has carried out a study on the benefits of CHP in 2050, and we see that adding CHP to the 2050 energy mix in a net zero scenario has multiple benefits for both the energy system as well as consumers. Due to its energy efficiency, CHP can actually deliver energy savings that translate into 4 to 8 billion euro of yearly savings. And that is by generating up to 16% of electricity and 27% of total heat, with these shares being more important in certain sectors. So in industry, of course, CHP will play a more important role. So is the case in district heating, for instance. So with that, I close my overview.
Thank you, Alexandra.
Revert back to Hans.
Thank you, Alexandra.